and welcome to the Forestry England podcast. My name is Bex, and I'm travelling up and down the country visiting some of the nation's most beautiful forests, and I'm unearthing some surprising stories along the way. This week we're just north of Birmingham in Cannock Chase. An area of outstanding natural beauty and a former royal forest, it's one of England's finest landscapes. Here, we're chatting about timber and the climate.
We always replant what we've taken away, unless the objective for that piece of the forest has changed. One really current example of that is around carbon sequestration. So there are some areas where deep peat was planted over with trees, and it's now clear, scientific advice makes it clear, that we're better to try and restore and re-wet those areas of peat than we would be to replant trees on them.
That's James. And we're also chatting to Rich from Trash Free Trails, all about the ways that you can help make a difference in your local area.
6 years ago, I was, pretty much at the bottom of the barrel, fairly serious drink and drug problem. I didn't have purpose until I rediscovered myself through adventure. So this idea of purpose and adventure was something that I knew was in the back of my head. And then when I saw Dom, who founded Trash Free Trails, talking about purpose and adventure, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to be doing with myself.
And producer Adam is going time travelling.
I'm looking at the history of Cannock Chase.
First, Cannock Chase lies in Staffordshire. Although the area sits on rock from the Triassic period, over 250 million years ago, the trees themselves are relatively new. Some of them were planted as a community woodland only about 22 years ago. And James knows all about them. He's Forestry England's Director of Operations.
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky to have a job like this. I have great responsibilities, I guess. Yeah, we really want our forests to thrive and for everyone who comes here to enjoy themselves. But most of all, I just consider myself lucky to have this job.
Oh, that's lovely. So you're a forester?
Yes.
And yep. I am definitely not a forester. Okay, I know very little about this. So when it comes to the management of trees, where do you start? Where does it all begin?
It starts with a plan, I think is the best answer to that. As a forester, your education starts with being clear about what your objectives are for a forest. And those objectives can include the timber and other forest products. They can include managing and looking after wildlife, ecosystems. They can include looking after people who want to come and visit you and spend their precious free time in the forest. So in Forestry England, all three of those things are really important to us. So we have objectives that encompass those, and once you have your objectives, you can start making a plan. So we are now much more about providing the space that's great for people to enjoy, great for nature to thrive and nature to recover, places that can be relevant to our response to the climate crisis, but also produce timber. And timber now, for us, is not so much about a strategic reserve for the UK's industries. It's about a really valuable way we can contribute to our running costs and also supply timber processing industries that are based in the UK.
So tell me, do we use timber exclusively from the UK or do we import timber in?
Oh, we're massive net importers of timber. So in the world, we are currently ranked as the third largest net importer of timber products as a country. So we import about 29 million cubic metres of forest products. We export about 6, and that net balance of 22 million cubic metres leaves us with, a huge consumption by all of the people who live in the UK. So we absolutely try and do our bit to produce timber to contribute to that demand and to try and keep net imports down as much as we can.
Do you think that's possible? Do you think there'll be a time when we only use timber from Forestry England sites?
Well, no, I think that's very unlikely given the scale of the demand. But for sure, we could make a bigger contribution. Forestry England and all the other woodland managers across the UK. There's a great drive by the government at the moment to plant trees to lock up carbon, to help in the fight against climate change. Finding the land to do that on is quite difficult. There are so many competing interests in the UK around land use, but yeah, I think we could work really hard, have a much larger area of forest for the future, and that eventually could make a really good contribution to our demand for timber.
When it comes to trees, I mean, a lot of people think you shouldn't cut them down ever because they're helping the planet, they're helping the environment. But as you know, we do need to cut them down.
Yeah.
What for timber for the use of day-to-day objects, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we practice sustainable forest management, and what I mean by sustainable forest management is, in all the dimensions of what we do in the forest, we are looking to maintain what we have and ideally grow it for the future. So in terms of the timber potential here, we measure what we have. We know in great detail how many areas of trees we have here, what they're likely to produce, and we don't overcut. So we always stay within the timber production potential of those forests. We always replant what we've taken away, unless the objective for that piece of the forest has changed. So, one really current example of that is around carbon and carbon sequestration. So there are some areas, especially in the uplands, where deep peat was planted over with trees, and it's now clear, scientific advice makes it clear, that we're better to try and restore and re-wet those areas of peat than we would be to replant trees on them. And so that, by degrees, that's leaving forests in a more varied state, different areas of open space for carbon sequestration, for nature habitat and nature recovery. And I think that's one of the things that makes being a forester a really exciting job, that we are able, in spite of it being a very long-term business, I mean, we're talking about a tree, call it a crop of trees that takes 80 years perhaps to grow and to be ready to be mature and sent off to whatever use they're going to be used for.
So tell me, we are right in the middle now of the forest. We've got a little pond to the right of us here. And tell me about the trees that we are surrounded by, because there seem to be lots of different types. Would any of these be felled for timber, or are these just here to provide landscape?
So what we're looking at, so paint a picture of the pond. It's the pond's been created by making a little dam across what used to be a stream. That's filled up and looks very attractive. That stream then sort of winds up a little gentle valley into the forest, and then below us heads downwards down the same valley. It's filled with alder trees, birch trees, willow. You can see some holly over there. These are all the trees which are really going to stay as part of this valuable space as an ecosystem, as a habitat. They won't be harvested. We're not looking to turn everything we grow into timber products. But if we look a little bit further away from the pond and the watercourse, we can see some pine trees. So we've got a mixture here of mature pine trees. Some are Scots pine, some are Corsican pine. These are very much the trees that would be in demand for timber as sawn products, as products which are chipped up and then reconstituted, perhaps into work surfaces and kitchen units, things like that. Some parts of the tree are quite likely to go into biomass for produce fuel for heat and electricity. But yeah, a modern way of looking at a forest and planning a forest is that it's a mosaic of permanent spaces with open spaces, water, trees, which will be there forever, be really great habitat. And then there's other places which are the spaces where we grow trees that we'll harvest for timber.
So how do you pick which trees go where, and also which trees you harvest? How old do they have to be? Is there a certain age they have to be?
Timber production in the UK, especially as you go further north and further up into the uplands, are based around a fairly small set of conifers, and most of those conifers actually came to us as imports from, particularly from Northwest America, because many years ago, as Britons did. They went out into the world and they hunted for plants for gardens, hunted for plants as crops, hunted for plants to grow in forests as timber producing species. And the great thing about, there's a certain zone on the northwest coast of America which in climate terms was very, very well matched to the UK. And so a lot of those trees, Sitka spruce, Douglas fir, lodgepole pine and others, they came back and they were trialled, and we found the places in the UK where they worked really well.
Well, should we go and see some of the trees that are, I guess, going to be cut down soonish? What do we think?
Well, let's have a walk up here and see what we can find.
James and I wandered to the right of the pond that we were looking at and up a small hill about 100 paces down the main trail.
We've arrived somewhere quite interesting, actually. So we've walked up the hill a bit. We're now standing beside an area of trees which I'd say are, about middle-aged. They're sort of halfway through their journey towards being felled and turned into whatever timber products we want.
So what is middle age for a tree?
Well, it depends on the species. So we're looking at a mixed area of, it's mostly Scots pine. I can see some Corsican pine in there as well. I would guess that on this site, in this forest, these trees would be mature and sort of ready to clear the site at about 80 years old.
Okay.
So 80 years after planting. Mm-hmm. What happens, on sites that are not too windy, we would expect to do something called thinning. So that means as the trees get older, perhaps from about 25 years on, we'd go in there and we'd start to take out the trees that were a bit twisty, didn't really look like they'd make, nice, big, straight, mature trees. We'd give the best trees space, so we'd remove some of the ones round about them so that they can fill the space available. Yeah. The interesting thing about this particular crop I can see is that we've started to do some underplanting here. So if you see these smaller trees in that area there, we've started to add those as the next tree crop, so that when this tree crop, these pines are removed, but by the time there'll be middle-aged Douglas fir growing here as well. So the impact on the site won't be quite as great as it would be if you just removed all of the trees in one go. So pine trees and birch trees, and you can see quite a few birch trees which have just naturally seeded in here, they're what are known as light demanders. So they do best on a site which is completely cleared.
Right.
In ecological terms, they are pioneer species. So they're the first to arrive on a site when it's disturbed. And then, if you, let the millennia roll on and for things to change naturally, the light demanders would eventually become senescent and die, but other tree species which, can establish underneath existing trees would come in. And eventually, in the right site with the right seed available, in England, in the past, you would have got an oak forest. That would have been the sort of climax forest type. But even those oak forests would eventually senesce and die, and gaps would happen, and the whole thing would start all over again. The pioneers would come in, and then so on and so on. So in many ways, what foresters do is mimic nature, but on a bit more of an accelerated scale.
It's so interesting because I often think of, I think if a tree is planted, it lives forever, unless you're going to obviously cut it down. But in my head, a tree, great, it's there for hundreds and hundreds of years, but that's not the case at all, is it?
No, it's a living thing. It's like us, we're young, we get into middle age, we become old, we senesce, and eventually we die. And that's just, the natural way of things. But because trees live for such a long time and people become used to seeing them, it's a bit of a shock to see them removed or, for harvesting, or just to see them die and fall over. It's an emotional thing. You form emotional connections with individual trees and areas of forest. So.
Yeah, you're used to seeing them all the time. And I assume, so for this, for example, when it eventually gets cleared, at least the impact on it, if you were to come here every day and one day is gone, you've got these trees growing up, so it won't be too heartbreaking.
Yes, definitely the impact will be a bit less. And we have a system of growing trees called continuous cover, which basically seeks to never have the site completely cleared. So you're just continually encouraging trees to grow up from underneath, ideally naturally regenerated, so the seeds distributed by the wind or birds or whatever. If you can't do that, then an alternative is to plant underneath. But one generation of trees is basically coming up underneath the other, so that when you take away the mature trees, the next are already established.
Now, I don't know about you, but I found my chat with James really reassuring, because I'm not going to lie, seeing forest clearings and chopped down trees stacked up next to a path, it feels a bit wrong. But speaking to James, it is just amazing to hear how much time and care the team at Forestry England put into producing timber in a way that has the least impact on the environment. But also how important it is that we do grow our own timber here at home. Because we all know how important wood is, but I'm not sure how often we think about where it's coming from. This sounds like a great time to remind you that if you love forest and want to help support and care for them, why not consider a Forestry England membership? As well as free parking at incredible places all around the country, membership really helps Forestry England continue to care for the nation's forests. As you've been hearing in this series, forests are having a pretty tough time at the moment, and they need all the help they can get. Membership is an awesome way to show your support and to help Forestry England do their work looking after these vital natural places for the future. Find out more about membership at the end of this episode. So, we've heard a lot from James about planting, underplanting, and the many ways in which trees and timber can help humankind fight the climate crisis. I thought what he said about the timeline of a forest was a really cool idea, so I asked our producer Adam to see if he could bring that idea to life.
I've been fascinated this entire series with the idea of trees being a passive witness to history, the idea that everything happens around them and that our stories are reflected onto them. But the reality is that sometimes things happen because of them. The sounds you're hearing right now beneath me are a time-lapse of the forest. It's one day compressed into barely over a minute, 0.003% of a tree's 80-year life expectancy. From its early days as a royal hunting ground in the medieval era to its role as a vital timber resource during the Industrial Revolution, Cannock Chase is intimately intertwined with the story of England. Its story is our story. The abundance of oak trees in Cannock Chase, for example, played a crucial role in our shipbuilding industry. During World War II, its dense woodlands provided cover for military training exercises. Special units trained here for missions behind enemy lines, and the forest itself became a crucial part of England's wartime defence strategy. These trees stand not only as witnesses, but as active participants in the story of civilization. And visitors continue to wander its trails, and as you've been hearing, we continue to harvest its crop and use the trees for all kinds of things. None of this is a finished story. It's up to all of us to help write its next chapter, which is where our next guest comes in.
One of the things that has struck me at every Forestry England site I've travelled to is just how well they're taken care of. That's the work of Forestry England members of staff for sure, but it's also the work of a team of volunteers around the country. They're called the Trash Mob. For many people, the environmental crisis seems so colossal that it is kind of overwhelming. And rather than inspiring action, the scale of the problem can sometimes seem so insurmountable that people don't even try. But that's where trash-free trails come in. Breaking things down into bite-sized chunks of achievable action is Rich's job.
Where do I start? So we're a community interest company, and we exist to protect our trails and the wild places they take us to. And our mission is to reconnect people with nature through the simple yet meaningful act of removing single-use pollution from places we love. So we were founded in 2019 with nothing but an Instagram post and £0. When you're starting up an organisation, any organisation, it's very easy to get bogged down in a management structure and a strategy and finances and support and an office and transport and all the rest of it. But with the kind of work that we're doing, which is essentially global behaviour change, to put a big sticker on it, you can't do any of that without community. So where better place to start than social media? So that's what we did. We started with I didn't, Dom Ferris founded it. He started with one social media post. One of our most important values is everybody is welcome. We are riders, runners, and roamers. So when we're talking about forests, when we're talking about recreational trails, we're talking about places that everybody can use and everybody can access, provided they've got the resources to do so, whether that's an able body or financial ability to do so, or transport links. As long as you're able to get there, everybody's welcome. I bet your next question is what's your work?
Well, actually, no, my next question was going to be, you talked about giving them tools. I was like, are these metaphorical tools, like ideals, or are these like physical tools that you're giving people?
Yeah, no, I mean, good question, because the answer is both, really. Like, I could give, the thing is, this is the beauty of it, right? Like, if I gave you a litter picker, a bin bag, and a pair of gloves, first of all, you know what to do with those things. You're not like, people have brains, like that's quite obvious, like tools. What am I supposed to do with this? But also you can buy those things anywhere, right? You can, and previous experience in this kind of thing, and certainly when Dom used to work for Surfers Against Sewage, when he found that if all you do is provide people with physical tools, then if the gloves are missing from the pack, they're like, oh, I haven't got my gloves, I can't do the thing. Or I haven't got my pack, I can't do the thing. And it's like, it's literally gloves and some bin bags. You've probably got those at your house. Yes, we do provide physical tools, but only to very specific groups, because again, you can get that stuff yourself. It's more about the inspiration and that information that builds up digital tools. So on our website, we've got a huge suite of totally free to access resources that are like risk assessments, method statements, like a 9-step process to a safe, effective and enjoyable trail clean, letters to landowners, all of that kind of legal stuff you'd need to put on a litter pick, a community litter pick. We're careful to avoid the word event, because when you say event, landowners go, whoa, event, that's going to be a music festival, but it's not like that. So yeah, it's about really the intellectual tools as well to be equipped to do the things that we're talking about, because not 9 times out of 10, a lot of the time you're confronted with, there'll always be someone in some community that's like, I'm not picking up anybody's rubbish. They're the people that we need to talk to. We don't need to talk to, not that we don't need to talk to them, it's we don't need to work quite so hard with the people that are doing it every day, every week, every month, whatever it is. It's the people who are resistant to it, or the people that are actively dropping single-use pollution without any sort of care. So that's what that toolkit does, that digital toolkit, and that's where all the inspiration on our social media and our project kind of engagement processes lead towards, is getting those individuals that are maybe resistant or otherwise disconnected from the work that we're trying to achieve.
I have to say, I mean, you're mentioning like your website and your online presence. The website is great. I mean, it does exactly what you want it to do. It makes you feel quite inspired and feel like you're going to be going out there and like part of this team. And I see that you're online, you've got this kind of summer of purposeful adventure and leaving a positive trace. And that is quite inspirational, isn't it?
Oh, thank you very much. Purposeful adventure is something that connected me to this work like straight away. So I am not, I'm always careful how I say this, I'm not of this world. What I mean by that is that I'm not an environmentalist. I haven't been doing this my whole life. As as a lot of people in this world have. Like, a lot of people that you speak to in the inverted commas environmental space have grown up ecologically, if you like. I didn't do that. 6 years ago, I was pretty much at the bottom of the barrel, fairly serious drink and drug problem. What I now know was a fairly serious problem. At the time, I was obviously just having loads of fun, and it was great. But one thing led to another, and I wasn't interested in that anymore. And I rediscovered nature through mountain biking, and through outdoor physical activity. I rediscovered myself, nature, the other people I share that space with, and the term, finding, I didn't have purpose until I rediscovered myself through adventure. So this idea of purposeful adventure was something that I knew was in the back of my head. And then when I saw Dom, who founded Trash Free Trails, talking about purposeful adventures, like, this is it, this is what I'm supposed to be doing with myself. Purposeful adventures isn't so much about the removal of single-use pollution, although the simplest thing to do to make your adventures purposeful is remove some single-use pollution. But really, it's that tagline, leave a positive trace. So the idea with that is that, what if our adventures not only sustained us, but actively improved not just the places, but the people and ourselves. So we've been able to demonstrate over the last 3 years of running Purposeful Adventure that it does do that. So we've been able to measure nature connection before, measure well-being before a Purposeful Adventure, whether that's going to talk to a school group, whether that's a mindfulness nature connection walk, or whether it's just a trail clean, a litter pick, and then measure all of those constructs afterwards, and they improve. So we're not just saying these things, it's proved it and it works.
And it's really interesting as well, like you mentioned about well-being. A lot of people have said, the forest in particular, being outdoors, it does help with well-being. And I think for yourself, obviously, there's that kind of exercise element, but it is the well-being of connecting to nature and to people. It's such a big deal.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, if I was gonna, I'll flip roles for a minute and I'll ask you a question. What do you think the biggest problem is that we're trying to tackle?
Well, I mean, to me, there seems to be quite a few little bits here and there. Like, it is obviously the pollution as well, like, obviously the plastic and littering, but also like people being lonely, people being like not connecting with each other by the sounds of it.
Yeah. So I should have asked that question at the beginning, because literally 99% of people say trash, rubbish, pollution, whatever. But it just happens that you're right. Disconnection is the problem that we're trying to tackle, and litter or pollution just happens to be a metaphor for that. So if you're someone who drops litter on purpose, whether it's found its way there otherwise is a different conversation. But if you drop litter on purpose, you're taking deliberate action to make that place worse, which means that you must be disconnected to the place. You must be disconnected to the other people in that place. And interestingly, for me in particular, and for us as an organisation, you must really be disconnected to yourself, because you're there for a reason. You've come to the forest, whether it's for exercise or release or a cup of coffee or family day out or whatever it is, and then you're taking action to make that place worse. Like, you must be disconnected from that. And there's enough work out there now, this is a correlation, so I can't attribute total causality to it, but there's enough research out there now that says that improvements in connection broadly, whether it's to yourself, nature, or other people, improve well-being. So by extension, the fact that you have to do that, and the fact that that study exists, means that disconnection must mean people have lower levels of overall well-being, right? So the bigger picture for me here is that, what I'm about to say should be of no surprise to anybody. Like, we're experiencing bigger numbers, larger rates of common mental disorders, anxiety, depression, ADHD, bipolar, than ever before. The reasons for that are multitude, and probably need another couple of hour-long podcast to talk about. The symptoms of which are being seen on our trails and in our wild places. They're being seen by, Keep It and Tidy have been doing cleanups for the last 70 years. In that time, the amount of rubbish that they've found has gone up 500%. Yes, there's more people in the world. Yes, there's more plastic being produced, but there's also 70% more people have depression now than they did 10 years ago. So our mission isn't just about trash-free trails. Well, okay, it is just about trash-free trails, but the trash can be Lucozade, Coca-Cola, Red Bull. They're the top 3 items we found, by the way. But it can also be low levels of connection, low levels of well-being, low self-esteem, low confidence. So we try and try and tick all the boxes, really.
Do you have any tips for anybody who is listening to this and thinking, oh, this sounds like a really good thing to do? Like, what would you say to them?
I mean, the first thing is I bet a lot of people are already involved. So this is the thing with the trash mob is you're probably already doing it, whether you're connecting to nature. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably of that ilk. So you're probably at least some of the way there. But if you are someone who removes single-use pollution, then the best way to sort of deepen that involvement a little bit more is to take part in our citizen science research project. So that's called the State of Our Trails Report, and it's a master's research project with Bangor University that's looking to establish the prevalence, impacts and distribution of single-use pollution on recreational trails across the world. It's the first and only study of its kind to do that. And all you have to do is go onto the website, click the link, and there's two options, a trash count and a trash survey. Trash count is exactly what it sounds like. You tell us how many items you found, no more information really, just distance, date and location. And then a trash survey is a little bit, it takes about 30 seconds to do that first one. Trash survey is a little bit more in depth. It asks you to break it down into the different categories. So we've got about 60, 70 different categories of pollution that you can find. All the different brands and stuff, it asks you to break it down into a little bit more detail. But all of that data goes into our research. So it's part of a 5-year action plan. Again, I encourage people to give it a go and see how you get on.
You can find out more about trash-free trails and ways to get involved at trashfreetrails.org. Now, Rich was super inspirational, wasn't he? And a great representation of the many diverse, interesting and fascinating people that the forest and the great green outdoors can attract. Are you one of them? Thanks for listening to the Forestry England podcast. This episode was all about timber and the climate. It was produced and edited by Adam Stoner with help from Rebecca Small. Research by Kieran Snedden and Dominic Head. My name's Bex Lindsay. Next week, it's a season finale. We're heading to the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire, on the border of Wales, where we'll meet a whole host of characters.
Yeah, it's a bit of a juggle.
It's all about mountain biking, trails, and getting out and active in the nation's forests.
Round the first corner, over a little hump, next corner, whoa, there we go.
If you've loved this podcast, why not take out a Forestry England membership? Whether you're looking to smash that couch to 5k routine or just want somewhere incredible to take the kids on the weekends, there's literally no place like the forest. A membership is such a good way to support the amazing work that Forestry England do to care for the nation's forests. Their future is our future too. You can find out more about membership at forestryengland.uk and check out the show notes for a whole host of information on different ways that you can spend your weekend in the great green outdoors. See you soon!